Mike, thanks very much for chatting with us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Should we start with how, where, and why you got your musical education and how you learned your craft?
I was born in Rhodesia, which is Zimbabwe now, and my mother encouraged me to study music, to play the piano. But I was good at chemistry, and my father sent me to university to become a chemist. And when I failed my university because I was hanging out with all the jazz musicians, he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Go to America to study music." So he agreed with that, and I went to America, to Berklee School of Music. This is in 1959, and studied music for 4 years. And music became my life rather than a hobby. And then when I came to live in England in '65, I did well fairly quickly. Was asked by the BBC to form a band, formed a band, got some radio play, started performing publicly with a big band. And one of the people in the audience at one of the concerts was Bill Oddie, whom I got to know. And we used to go to parties at his house. And he's a real jazz fan. So, but we also listened to other music. So, my wife and Bill also liked some pop music, which I got to like, and in particular the band, Bob Dylan's band. But they performed in those days on their own, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and a couple of other people. And then when Bill started the Goodies, he asked me to do the music for the program, and asked me to, when we bandied ideas about, he wanted a band that sounded like those things we were listening to.
So this would have been in 1969, was it, when Bill said that the series was coming?
I can't remember. I arrived in '65, and it took me a while. I joined bands, rehearsal bands, and then I started playing in the studios to make a living. And it was in '68 that I got my own band and performed. And then from '68, I started performing on a fairly regular basis. I sort of got involved with the local jazz scene, the whole British jazz scene. And Bill came to one of those concerts that I did.
Right, how big was your band at this point?
It was like a small, big band. Let me see, there were 3 saxes, 2 trombones, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 11 or 12 piece.
Ah. So after Bill had approached you to do the music for the Goodies, was it a smaller band you were operating with, or around the same size?
Well, my own bands were always something like 11 to 14 piece band. I sometimes had a cello, I sometimes had extra percussion. But when Bill and I got together and talked about what he needed, as I said, we'd listened to Bob Dylan band, which was a couple of guitars, bass, drums and keyboard and vocals. So that's what Bill wanted, and we had a 5-piece band for that. But it never performed in public. It was only in the studio. It was never even seen on the program. It was background music.
Yeah. So did you handpicked all these guys knowing what Bill's leanings were?
Yes, I mean they were. I was also working around that time writing arrangements for some pop records.
Ah, anyone we'd know?
My goodness. We're going back a lot. I mean, I did work with some names, but I think it was after this time. I mean, I've done things for Elton John and Sting and Peter Gabriel, Joni Mitchell, but these were all afterwards, into the 70s. It was quite a heady days. I mean, they were really, really exciting days. But I enjoyed all these different areas of music.
You mentioned that Bill liked to work with tape recordings and hummed melodies and so on. So what was your process after he'd either give you a tape or hum it to you? Would you then sort of sit down and transcribe it? Or would you go back and forth over a number of days to nail down the arrangement?
Actually, it was a pretty quick process because if Bill sang something into a tape, the harmony was sort of obvious. So I would transcribe the melody, put my own harmony to it, but as I say, it was pretty obvious. There wouldn't be too many choices what the harmony would be. But then with a keyboard and 2 guitars and bass guitar and drums, and with the musicians I had, I didn't have to write too much. And then in the studio, we would run it down once and then these guys would contribute their own. When Chris Spedding played, for instance, I just saw him on telly yesterday with Brian Ferry. That's old. Anyway, with these kind of guys, the less I wrote, the better. But they would need the structure. I would need to write 4-bar intro or whatever it was, and then the tune, and then an ending of some kind. So I would structure it. It would be an arrangement, but as I say, the less I wrote, the better. So that they would have all the information they needed there. And then Bill was there as well, so he would say, give me more of this, less of that. It wasn't too difficult. I remember I think we had to record the theme every time, every series. I know on another television program I did, we always had to re-record the theme. It was something to do with the Musicians' Union. And I think it might have been the case with the Goodies as well. But I'm only saying this because you asked me what tunes I remembered. I remember the theme a lot because we seemed to play it a lot. And I remember the Funky Gibbon, although I wasn't involved on that. Either Dave did it or somebody else did it. But I, for some reason, remember that tune the most. And then most of what else I did was those little cod commercials.
Ah.
They had a commercial break, but it would actually be a joke.
Yeah, the mock ads.
They required music. And actually, the music for those was mostly me. Bill gave it to me to write them.
Oh, so they'd say, here's the idea, or would they give you the vision? Or they just say, it's about, a breakfast cereal, off you go, Mike?
No, I would see it. I would have a picture.
Ah.
I would work to a picture.
Where would you meet with Bill to go over the music? And sort of how long for? Would you be in the BBC, or would you meet at his place or your place?
No, it was always his or my place. We didn't need the studio. We both had pianos at our places. So he would decide what he wanted, put as much of that as he could on tape with singing. I don't think he played anything on the tape. Give me the tape, and then we would discuss it. And then I'd know what to do. And then when I'd written it out, then we would both go into the studio. I remember the excitement of Bill and I getting together. He'd come to my place or I'd go to his place. We lived fairly near each other. And I never drove while I lived in England, but he did and had this little sporty mini car, amongst others, I think, and would pick me up and we'd go and just listen to music and say, then we had vocalists as well. And Joy sang on it.
Oh, Joy Yates.
Yeah. And there were 3 ladies, and I forget the lead lady's name. I remember, I can see her now. It was all girls, the 3 girls singers.
And they'd be backing Bill up and doing little counter things and all that.
Yeah, I remember we'd do the voices afterwards. We'd record the band first, they'd go home, and then we'd add the vocals. Were
there a lot of overdubs, or were the songs recorded virtually live?
No, virtually live. I mean, as I remember, it would be the band as a whole and then the vocals. And if there was anything else, if there's another overdub, they were infrequent and definitely not lots of overlays.
So would Bill lay down his vocals on the same day that you guys nailed the backing track?
I can't remember. You're longer. I have no. As you asked the question, I don't have an image of Bill singing in the studio, which makes me think that he added himself afterwards. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, anyway, without me being there. Also, he used to mix it. He, with the studio staff, would mix it.
Oh, see, that's something I never knew. So he was quite involved in, crafting the actual finished product.
Oh, very much so, yeah. When he composed the song, he knew what he wanted. He would relay that to me, and then I would give him the band, and then the finishing touches, he would make it how he wanted it.
Did you ever, in the studio, get Graham and Tim in there much to do little bits and pieces?
No, never. I mean, I saw them at parties and things, but if they did, it was once or twice. But I don't remember them ever in the studio, in the recording of the music studio. Of course, they were the film studio they were at, but I wasn't at those. No, I did go to some of them actually, but they were separate functions. It wouldn't be in the same place even.
Right, and how long, you do a whole season's worth, is that right?
I can't even remember that, but I imagine so, because that's how those sort of things worked. You'd go and do a whole bunch at a time. I remember being in the studio, but I can't remember if that was 1 out of 5 days or not. It was probably not more than 5 days.
Oh.
I can't remember that. I don't even have papers.
Oh, so I suppose if I was to ask, you don't have any of those old tapes with Bill humming the melodies on there or singing them, there's no chance of that, is there?
No, there's absolutely none. I mean, I do have old tapes. Old tapes are there, but I don't think there's any good. There might be. I'd have to go and look through it. Because I seem to remember him giving me cassettes. And I've moved around the world a lot. I lived in America and I'm living in Spain. With all those moves, I've lost a lot of stuff. And I don't have any cassettes that I recall. They might be in storage somewhere. There's some stuff in storage, but I don't recall. All I have, I can see them here, are 7-inch reels and 10-inch reels of tape. But what Bill gave me was always on cassette.
So can you tell us what other TV shows you did work for?
Oh, yes, a program called 99 to 1. I did a lot of those. 2 series, I think. That was in the early 90s. It was very dramatic, cops and robbers and bad guys and good guys, shootings and things. Leslie Grantham was the...
Leslie Grantham is Dirty Den from EastEnders, isn't he?
Yes. So we did... Right at the beginning of that program, it was done in England. It was an English program. Right at the beginning of it, I suggested to the musical supervisor and to the producer of the program that we do the first one in New York because it was going to be synthesizers. And I had these 2 young whiz kids that I'd worked with before on films on synthesizers. One specializing in percussion, Ben Whitman, and one specializing in the melodic. Jamshid Sharifi. Anyway, the production people and the music supervisor enjoyed going to New York so much that we did the whole series. We kept flying every month or whenever to New York to do the recording. But anyway, I really enjoyed that a lot. And the program aired and seemed to do well, but it never went into... It didn't go past 2 episodes. That was about 91 or 92.
Mm. You mentioned you remember the Funky Gibbon quite well, even though you weren't there for it. And I was going to ask, which songs do you clearly remember, if any, and why? But maybe I should instead ask, which episodes do you remember and why?
You can't ask me that because I don't remember. I do remember seeing, looking at DVDs or the programs themselves. I remember the 3 bicycles, the tri-bicycle, the tricycle, whatever.
The Trandom?
The Trandom, yeah. I remember that, and I remember houses falling down. I don't have a recollection of a particular episode. I just have these images, and I don't know which episodes they're from. And it's the same with the music. I remember the Funky Gibbon because it was really catchy, and Bill put so much effort in. He sang with really solidly when he sang it. I remember his face as he sang it, even though I wasn't involved in that one. But no particular episode stands out, but it's because I've forgotten, not because...
Oh, so at the time, would you watch them when they were broadcast?
Oh, yes, I watched every one. Especially when it was done. I might see bits of it as we were working on it, or he might play me bits, but I mostly remember... I've watched every one after that. It was the thing to, one of the things to do in those days. It's like Monty Python. And in my day, the Goon Show, although it was radio, I never missed the Goon Show. I missed some of the Monty Pythons, but I saw all the goodies. So
what would your peers in the jazz community, what was their feedback about the work you were doing on the goodies? Yeah,
we really are going back. This was at the beginning of my career, and I'm 72 now, and so I'm at the end of it. So I can't remember everything that happened there. The jazz scene in Britain was exciting. Bill was a real jazz fan. When I'd go around to his house, he'd have all the new records, and so we'd spend a lot of time listening to stuff not related to the goodies. And then we'd go to concerts together as well. As well as him coming to my concerts, we would go to other people's concerts together.
And did the both of you hang out with any of the musicians you'd go to see?
Yes, I don't know. Hang out usually means going, the green room or the.
Yeah, that sort of thing, yeah.
Yes, we do that a lot. And in the very first days of coming to London in '65, musicians used to gather every Monday in Archer Street and swap phone numbers and gigs and things, but that kind of stopped. I love that kind of social aspect, but it doesn't happen so much anymore.
Back in the day when you were working on the show, you were there for about 5 years. Did the band or you ever get any fan correspondence or feedback from viewers?
I don't recall any. The Goodies was popular, but the music as a band, we never performed in public, and so the public didn't know of it as an entity. And yet I've seen film footage of Bill, of the Goodies performing at a gig outside of the Goodies program. So they must have had a band there, but I wasn't involved with that. And I don't know who those musicians were. It might have been Dave MacRae. While I was there, I never did get any feedback from the public.
Well, the Goodies had all their big chart hits in 1975, and you'd...
I was gone already.
1974 you went. Well, Series 5 was your last, and all the music must have been finished in 74, and then they played those 13 episodes in February 75 they started.
Yeah.
So when you were recording those in 74, did they already know you were planning to leave?
They must have. I had been asked by Gary Burton, who was teaching at this time at Berkeley, to come to Berkeley for 1 year as composer in residence. So I must have known that at least a year before, because I went with my wife and 2 daughters came with me. And to uproot and go to America for the year had to be planned. It wasn't a last minute thing. So yes, Bill would have known that I was leaving. And because Dave MacRae was already in the band, he was an obvious person to take over. But I ended up staying 11 years. I went for 1 year and came back 11 years later.
And then when did you move to Spain, Mike?
That was only the end of 2005. I mean, I'd come back to England and I did a lot of film work, which in the late 80s and 90s. And when that suddenly dropped out, I got out of the loop. I mean, it wasn't by design. My daughter and grandson were living with me, and I decided to sell my house. And then she suggested moving to Spain because she already spoke Spanish very well. She learned it in New York. And that seemed fine because I still go to London every 6 weeks or so. So I managed to keep tabs with what connections I've got there. And Spain's just an easier place to live right now. And it's slower paced, but London's a very high energy place, which I find exhausting.
So do you have a siesta every day and enjoy the lifestyle?
Because I don't have a timetable, I just siesta when I need it. In fact, every time I want to go out to buy something, it's 1 o'clock and everything's shutting.
Oh, no.
I've been here. This is my 5th year, and I'm still not used to the timetable change. It's not a problem, though. Actually, it suits me too. I buy records when I buy CDs, which is mostly reissues of old stuff. I buy online. I seldom go into a shop anymore.
Oh, now I'm glad you raised that, Mike. Well, myself included, a lot of fans have been keen for years now for a CD release of the show's incidental songs because you just can't hear them without, the laughter track and the sound effects track and all these sorts of things. And a lot of us are very keen to say, I love those songs from the episodes. We can't listen to clear and clean copies of them. So what would need to happen if such a compilation was going to be released?
It would have to start by contacting Bill, because it's his material. So the thing is that I see 2 ways to go. Either to resurrect the old tapes and remaster them, or also to contact Dave MacRae as well as... After Bill, then Bill would presumably contact Dave and me. And then he needs to decide whether to resurrect the old tapes and remaster them or whether to record them again.
Oh, would the old tapes still exist with clean copies of the songs?
I would presume they're in the BBC archive.
Nice.
I would imagine Bill had copies of them, but the originals would probably be in the archive.
Well, that's a good start.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a possibility, and especially with November coming up. Oh, you ought to try. Well, with the music, it's the person you have to talk to is Bill. So, I mean, you ought to try.
I wonder if it'd need just a little independent record company to contact Bill and say, can we foot the bill for putting out a disc? And, can we pay for the mastering and see if he's okay with that?
Yes, that sounds the right way to go. I mean, when I read his book, those were good times for him. So my feeling is that he would like the idea.
I was going to say, when was the last time do you think you caught up with either Bill or Dave?
I did it, but this is ages ago now. I was at a film studio, and there he was in the cafeteria, and we talked for about 20 minutes. But although I do bump into people, it's weird. Since I've left London, I meet more of my old mates more often, but I haven't bumped into Bill. When I go to jazz concerts, I sometimes expect to see him there, but of late, I haven't met him at any.
Oh, well, I know he goes out to gigs because on Twitter, if you know Twitter, you often get people, they'll be at a gig. Like someone last week was at a gig by a singer called Jill Sabule, and they tweeted that Bill was in the audience. So these are just people in the public, they've spotted Bill at the gig, and they've said, hey, I'm at this gig, and Bill's there.
Oh, well, that's good to know. I mean, his love of jazz and wider than jazz, the pop world, but I'm thinking of the pop world in the 70s. He loved those things, and he would go to them. And the fact that he's still doing it pleases me. It actually seems obvious that he would go.
So aside from us at the podcast contacting you, how often do you now sort of get asked about the goodies, or how often do you hear people mention it?
I mean, it's not never, but it's not often either. It's occasionally, oh, are you the goodies guy, that someone might say, or if I'm doing, people ask me what I've done, and I say the goodies, they always seem to remember it. And lately I've just found a couple of YouTube, or people have sent me stuff, and I reminisce a lot with that, but I don't spend a lot of time at it. It's a one or two off thing, and then I move back into the present. So
these days, Mike, how many gigs would you be playing? A few a year, or more, or less?
Yeah, a few a year. Last week I did the Ian Carr's gig. Next week I go to Paris to teach. I do a week of workshops at the Paris Conservatoire, and I'll do a concert at the end of it. And in April I'm traveling around Austria with an Upper Austrian Jazz Orchestra playing swing music. Some Basie in Ellington. It's not my music, but it's for the fun of it. And then in June I have a concert in London with Academy Orchestra, and it's Mingus and Monk music that I've arranged.
So for our London listeners, do you know what the exact date is, or what it's going to be called, and what will
yes, it's June 25th or 6th.
What will the venue be for that one?
It's called King's Place, near King's Cross. I think it's a recently built place, and I haven't played there yet.
Will you be playing or conducting?
Conducting. It's June 26th.
Right, June 26th at King's Place.
It's called Mingus, Monk and Me.
Thanks very much for talking to us. It's been an absolute privilege, I've got to say.
Yeah, well, it's very nice for me. I mean, you're bringing up all this nostalgia comes. Yeah, I'm in the age of nostalgia, and so it's a treat to remember these things. And also to know that the things we did ages ago are still alive in some people's memories.
Thanks again, Mike.
You're very welcome, Jeff.